Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're doing Who Was Better. The topic for this Who Was Better? One of the great rivalries of Jim Crockett Promotions in the 1980s, Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff. Now, if you haven't seen any of my videos previously, we are going to grade these guys on 8 separate categories. Each category is graded on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. So each wrestler has a chance to get a total of 40 points. There is a chance for 5 bonus points at the end, which we'll get to that when we get there. With that being said, I'm going to start with our first category, Technical Wrestling. For Magnum TA, I'm giving Magnum a 3. Magnum to me was more of a brawler than a technical wrestler, and that's not a knock on him. It was kind of the style of the time. When you think of some of the other stars of that era, of that promotion, like a Dusty Rhodes or a Manny Fernandez, you kind of think of that brawling style, that hard-hitting, no-nonsense, beat-em-up bar fighting style. And Magnum was there. So for this, again, I'm giving Magnum a 3. I would say he was right about average with his technical capabilities. And going from that, Nikita Koloff. Nikita, I'm giving a 2. And again, Nikita's kind of a product of his time. He's one of the guys, and this is no knock on Nikita. I have a lot of fond memories of watching Nikita Koloff. I will still watch Nikita Koloff matches and enjoy them. But he came up in an era where the body style he has, similar to the Road Warriors, similar to the Powers of Pain, the Ultimate Warrior, that overly buff, let's just call a spade, steroided body type was coming more into fashion, and some of those guys didn't quite have the training. They were just thrust onto the air, and Nikita unfortunately was one of those guys that I don't think ever really tried to have that part of his game. But again, at that time, he didn't need it to be successful. You could get away with having a bear hug as your main move, or the Russian sickle, which is an amazing version of a lariat. So unfortunately, Nikita gets a 2 in this category. Now coming with our next category, striking. For Magnum, Magnum's getting a 4. And much like I said when I was talking about his technical ability, Magnum was much more of a brawler, much more of a bar fighter, and this is where it comes in. When I think of the great matches in Magnum's history, whether it be against Nikita or against Tully Blanchard or any other wrestler he went up against back in the day, I think of those blood feuds, those feud-ending fights, like the I Quit match with Tully Blanchard, and I think of the violence and how much it ramped up and how good he looked in those. So for that, Magnum gets a 4. Now for Nikita's getting a 5. I briefly touched on it in the technical wrestling, but his Russian sickle is one of my favorite, quote, clothesline, lariat, whatever you want to call it, one of my favorite variations of it. I put it right up there with Stan Hansen's lariat, Kobayashi's lariat, JBL's lariat. To me, it just looks devastating. And chances are he probably was just nailing people with it, which made it even more devastating looking. But for that, and his general ground and pound style, I'm giving Nikita a 5. Now next up, how they perform as a heel. I'm going to be as fair as possible here. I cannot recall ever seeing Magnum TA work as a heel. I'm pretty sure he did early in his career, but anything I've ever seen and anything I watched trying to do more research for this, he's always been a face. In the pursuit of fairness, in the pursuit of objectivity, I have to give him a 3. I have to put him at average because I don't know if he is or isn't. I don't know if he would have been a heel, how bad it would have been. And I know there's probably going to be some of you in the comments that say, oh, he was a heel here for this and he was awesome, or he was a heel here for that and he was terrible. Whatever it may be. In fairness, he gets a 3. And a little bit side note here, 3 for me is average. So I look at this kind of like if you were in school and you had A, B, C, D, F. 3 would be a C. So basically, you're just barely getting by at that point, if that makes sense. For Nikita Koloff, again, he was a product of his time. His time with his Uncle Ivan and Crusher Khrushchev as the Russians, they were some of the top heels in the promotion at that time. And Nikita, to me, as great as Ivan is, and Ivan Koloff is an underrated great of the wrestling sport. Nikita was that cop, because he was the guy that gave it gravity, gave it importance, gave it a face of it. If we do a parallel to movies, he's Dolph Lundgren from Rocky. I mean, that's basically what the character is, and he did it great. He really was menacing. He was really scary. When I was a kid, I hated him because he was an evil foreign menace, and yes, it's a different time. So, for that, Nikita gets a 5. Now, going from that, how they perform as a babyface. Magnum TA, Magnum is getting a 5. When I think of the quintessential Southern babyface, cowboy style, no nonsense, babyface in other words, I think of Magnum TA. I think of guys of this ilk. He gives you that impression that he's just as comfortable on the back of a horse as on the back of a motorcycle or in a wrestling ring. The fans gravitated to him and wanted him to be their hero, to be the guy that saves whoever, whether it be Dusty Rhodes getting beat down by the Russians or the Midnight Express, or whoever it was at the time. They wanted him to be that top face, and unfortunately, if he didn't have his accident, most likely he would have been. So for that, I'm giving Magnum a 5. Now for Nikita, Nikita did turn face basically right after Magnum's accident. He took his place in the Jim Crockett Cup and teamed with Dusty Rhodes and became the Superpowers, which I thought was awesome, but that was the high watermark. And after that, I don't think Nikita Koloff, the character, ever really worked as a babyface. I think it was good, it was serviceable, but I was never going to see Nikita Koloff world champion babyface. Nikita Koloff world champion heel, could have easily seen that. But as a babyface, I think he was limited. I think he was right about average. I think he was definitely getting a 3 for that. We'll go into our next category, promos. This is your ability to talk, whether it be in the ring or backstage or anywhere else. For Magnum, Magnum is getting a 3. And a lot of this feels harsh on Magnum, but you gotta remember, Magnum was just barely hitting his stride when he had his accident. He could have grown to been so much more. We see a lot of wrestlers who early in their career aren't great talkers that grow into being great talkers. Seth Rollins, for instance, is one. Drew McIntyre is another. Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson's another one. AJ Styles is a great example of this. So do I think he would have got there with practice? Yeah. Do I think Dusty Rhodes would have kept pushing him and got him to that point? Definitely. But from the body of work we have, I have to give him a... Now going from that for Nikita Koloff. Nikita is getting a 2. And the reason for that, in his time with the Russians, the main talker was Uncle Ivan. Uncle Ivan's a great talker. He did the heavy lifting. Nikita never really had a great talking ability, which is one of the reasons why I think when he transformed and became a babyface, even though the fans wanted to jump on board with him, they never really got behind him because of this. I think he's below average. I think he's subpar. I think it actually hurt him every time he did a promo. For that, he's getting a 2. Next category, presentation. So for Magnum TA, Magnum is getting a 3 here. And the reason being, a lot of the positives that Magnum TA has kind of feel the same here. I say this a lot when I come to presentation, and it's how do they stand out? Does his look differ from his peers? Is it something instantly noticeable? If you took Magnum TA's gear and put it on a different wrestler, would you know it was Magnum TA's gear? If you took Magnum TA, put his gear on Barry Windham, it looks exactly the same. And there's a lot of wrestlers that fit in that style. It's not a bad presentation, but it's not really one that he's memorable. I'm going to give him a 3 here. When I want to think of someone with a great presentation, and that doesn't have anything to do with maybe their work, I think of people like Ric Flair. If you put the Ric Flair robe on anybody else, it's somebody else wearing the Ric Flair robe. If you put the Road Warrior shoulder pads on somebody else, it's somebody else wearing their shoulder pads. If you put the red and yellow tights and knee pad combination, you're doing a Hulk Hogan cosplay. So for me, this is where Magnum TA gets just about average. Now for Nikita, I'm actually going to give him a 4. I think he's a little bit above average. Everything with the chain, and yes, I know it all tied into Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev having similar looks, but his look was so iconic. The red singlet with the hammer and sickle, or the black one that just had the CCCP here, and the chain wrapped around his neck. He he looked like a menace. He looked like a foreign menace. He looked like something that the Soviet Union would have sent to the Olympics as a wrestler. He looked the part, and for that, I'm giving him a little bit of a heads up over Magnum in this category. Now, our next category, charisma. For charisma, Magnum is getting a 5. When you think back and you have all of the teenage girls that love Magnum TA, all of the teenage boys and younger kids that love Magnum TA, that wanted to be Magnum TA, all of the fans he had, that was all on his innate charisma. He had a charisma that was just natural to him. And he was special in this category. There are very few wrestlers that have that. There's very few Dwayne Johnsons, very few Steve Austins, very few Dusty Rhodeses. Magnum TA is in that category. And I know his career was cut short, but if he would have went another 5, probably 10 years, he definitely had, if you look at a regular wrestler's career, he had 5 to 10 years left and 5 years in his prime left. He could have easily been Jim Crockett in the NWA's answer to Hulk Hogan. That's how much the fans love this guy. For that, he gets a 5 for charisma. Now for Nikita gets a 4. While I did say his promos were lacking, that's not the only thing that goes into this. His believability, again, his heel charisma, how much you wanted to hate him, that goes into this. And he looked the part. He was the foreign menace. When America was afraid that at any point Russia could drop bombs on us, and here's something for you younger kids that are millennials or younger that may be stumbling on this video. When I was in school, and other Gen X and probably a little bit older people could tell you this too, we used to have nuclear bomb drills. That's how serious the Cold War was, where we would hide under our desks when a siren would go off. Kind of like you probably have fire drills in your school now, and with the way the world is now, you probably have school shooting drills as well. I don't know. I don't have any kids, so I don't know what they do in schools right now, but I would assume they probably do that. But that's how bad the tension was. So being a foreign character, being a Russian character, it looks hokey to people now, especially with the globalization that the internet has given us. Heck, there's Russian people that watch my videos. At the time, there was no bigger villain than being just somebody that loved Russia, which is crazy, but it is what it is. His charisma was off the charts. He gets a 4 for that. Well, I guess not off the charts, but his charisma was amazing, so he gets a 4. Now, our final category, big game performance. This is when they're in the main event. This is when they're in a title match, when they have everything on the line. They're carrying the company. They're carrying the show. For this, I'm giving both guys a 4. And if you've seen their Best of 7 series, that is the main reason they got this. That is one of the best Best of 7 series that I've ever seen. In my opinion, wrestling's been trying to copy it since then. We had Booker T and Chris Benoit do something similar. Just recently we had Andrade and Carmelo Hayes did something similar. And there probably was some before this, but it was a perfect way to get two younger talents and try to build them both at the same time, using each other to build each other. I thought it was awesome. Now, where they both don't quite get to that 5 is, I don't think either one of them had any really great world championship matches. Flair and Nikita had a few good matches, but when I think about it and I put it down the line, like, let's say Ric Flair's top 40 or 50 matches, I don't put Nikita Koloff anywhere on that. Even though they were good, he had to go against Flair and Steamboat or Flair and Sting or any other numerous great matches that Flair had. Same with Magnum. I think Magnum had great matches, but I don't think he ever had those great main event matches. And again, a lot of that's because his career was cut short, but I gotta judge him on the body of work he has. It would be like saying that a guy that hit 50 home runs for 4 years in a row and has 200 home runs is equivalent to Babe Ruth. Unfortunately, he just doesn't have the numbers to prove it. So for that, they both get a 4. Now, giving them a total, Magnum TA has a total of 30, Nikita Koloff has a total of 29, but wait, there is a bonus. And the way you get the bonus 5 points, every Wednesday, I put up a poll on my community page here on YouTube. Basically, it's one simple question: who is better? And whoever wins the poll, they get 5 bonus points. This is my way to to break ties, or to give you guys an opinion. As you can see, it carries a lot of weight, especially when they're close like this. So it's not just my opinion, it's your opinion too. With over 600 votes, the bonus points go to Magnum TA. Giving him a total of 35. Magnum TA is your winner. And I gotta agree with it. As close as I think these two guys were, I do think that Magnum is just a notch above Nikita. And again, it's one of those really historical what ifs. If Magnum would have got to keep going, what would the wrestling landscape look like? But yeah, for that, again, I think Magnum TA definitely deserves a win. If you made it here to the end, hit that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. There's a nice little button that does that there. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Who Was Better.